wrong. I'm done with it. I'm done with this nonsense. Today, I'm gonna show you exactly why Christian presuppositionalism is not only ridiculously circular, but downright evil. Yes, I said it, evil. Because they've decided to cling on to their cosmic security blanket instead of facing the self-evident truth of our shared naturalistic, atheistic reality that's been revealed to all of sound mind through both natural and special revelation in an undeniable way. Presuppositionalists, they're just cunning evangelists. They claim that every single human thought rests on some foundation you can't prove from the outside. Fine. Yeah, we all have assumptions. Who cares? But where they go with it is absolutely crazy. They insist that their assumption has to be the literal Christian God of the Bible. You heard me. The entire biblical framework is their starting point. No questions asked. Do you know how insane that is? Oh, and get this. If you dare question their cosmic story about a talking snake and a floating zoo boat, they cry, circular reasoning is inevitable. Well, maybe it's inevitable if you want to wave your theology wand in everyone's face, but it's not inevitable for those of us who actually use good old-fashioned observation and logic. You can too, just look at the trees, bro. Look, they say their worldview is the only coherent one. oh man. Meanwhile, they're going around they're going around in circles like a dog chasing its tail, yipping. You need God to know anything at all. But here's the kicker. First, they rebrand their vicious circularity. That is, God is real because we have revelation, and that revelation is real because God says so. And they have the gall to call it virtuous circularity. Are you joking, my ass? Second, they love to scramble up everything, not just for you, but for them too, by mixing up epistemology, which is simply how do we know stuff, with ontology, which is what actually is being. They'll go, if God doesn't exist, you wouldn't be able to do logic. And I'm like, bro, calm down. Just because you assert your invisible friend built the rules doesn't mean everybody has to share in your fairy tale. I wish you could see me adjusting my fedora right now. So today, what I'm going to be doing is very simple. I'm going to dismantle presuppositional apologetics for the 700th time. You might be asking, Taco, you've already provided sound argumentation to disprove their position. Where can you even go from there? Well, my plan is to expose how presuppositionalists pretend their hocus pocus is unavoidable. Or even, holy crap, I can't believe I'm saying this word, virtuous. While it's just pure question begging. They know it's not virtuous. I'll also reveal how they butcher the difference between metaphysical necessity, like does some cosmic being exist, and epistemic necessity, which is how we figure out facts. Because guess what? Even if some sky daddy was out there twiddling cosmic knobs, that doesn't automatically mean you have to believe in that daddy for your brain to compute 2 + 2 = 4. So yep, guessed it, we're diving into the devious depths of Cornelius Van Til, Greg Bahnsen, and their minions. We'll see exactly why they keep spouting this pseudo-intellectual babble, and how us, atheist presuppositionalists, people grounded in real reality, counter their illusions. So strap in, folks, because this fedora's about to annihilate Christian presuppositionalism again. Before we get into this, though, presuppositionalism is wielding the Bible like a sledgehammer to crush any conversation. We, the noble knights of atheistic presuppositionalism, embrace obvious facts like gravity, evolution, and the fact that chocolate and peanut butter are not a great combination. Meanwhile, the Christian side, they want to say we can only do logic if we silently borrowed it from their worldview. But bro, it's our naturalistic presuppositions that you borrow from our worldview, from our paradigm, that actually let you do your silly internet debates. You literally have to presuppose naturalism to watch this video on YouTube. So have some gratitude, because you're borrowing from our worldview. If I have to break this down one more time to a Christian presuppositionalist, my irony meter might literally explode. Let's talk about circular reasoning, also known as petitio principii, or as I like to call it, pretend proof by running in circles. So this is where the brilliant conclusion is already hiding in the premises. You know, like saying, we presuppose God to be necessary for logic, therefore logic proves God, right? That's like saying, my fedora is cool because I wear it. I wear it because it's cool. Does that sound right? It shouldn't. It's absolute nonsense. But what do presuppositionalists do? They love this trick. They'll say God must exist because we have revelation, which is the same thing as saying they presuppose God. Therefore, God exists. Because obviously, it's inconceivable to them that logic could just be a tool that humans created to figure out reality. The real one, not their imaginary cosmic battle of good versus evil. Look here, Mr. Presupper. In real grown-up philosophy, you gotta give independent support for your conclusion. That means it's not fair to put your conclusion into the premise. That's a crazy concept, right? But you might say, these presuppositionalists all have their conclusion in the premises, and they claim it's virtuously circular. Look, their entire shtick falls apart if you don't already agree with them. Because if you're not on their Jesus train from the get-go, they don't have anything. Nothing at all to back them up. And guess what? That's what they're calling virtuously circular. It's so circular, I can't see straight. They pat themselves on the back for it. It's absolutely disgusting and downright evil. Not only are they lying to themselves, they're lying to other people and doing it with a smile. They're like a bad used car salesman selling you a beater with a way too high interest rate and $2,000 over the top. Now we're to the meat and potatoes. Their circular strategy. We're going to be talking about the transcendental argument for God now, or TAG as they like to call it. They say without the Christian God, you can't make sense of logic, morality, or science. Really? Sure, because no other possibility could account for logical laws, right? Not even maybe the laws of nature themselves, maybe abstract objects, or I don't know, the fact that humans are rational mammals using reason to survive and created a system that allows them to reason effectively? No, they skip all of that, and they say it has to be God. Here's the real kicker. They jump from there must be some transcendent thing for logic to hence the triune God of the Bible. And if you disagree, well, you're an idiot who can't do logic, apparently. You have access to no intelligibility. What a joke. Now, when you tell them, look, buddy, we can meet halfway and, evaluate evidence based on common sense or rational standards, they'll resort to, there's no neutral ground. You either start with God or you're a big, silly, immoral clown. Well, how convenient, right? By claiming there's no neutral ground, they dodge all the critiques and keep their fortress of circularity completely self-sealed. La 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 la, can't hear your objections. La 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 la, we're in the only consistent worldview. La 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 la. They've built themselves a neat little loop where it's impossible to question them, because to question them, you already have to join them. In short, they're pulling off the oldest trick in the apologetic book. Lock yourself in a bubble where your premises can never be tested or falsified. It's like a little kid plugging their ears, going, nope, not listening to reason, nope, then turning around and calling you ignorant. Give me a break. So that's presuppositionalism's big secret. They lean on circular reasoning, but slap a sticker on it that says, no, that's virtuous. And if you point out how ridiculous that is, they cry about there being no neutral ground, effectively making themselves uncriticizable. Trust me, folks, that's not a philosophy, it's a cult. The only reason they can even do logic or practice morality at all is because they're borrowing base naturalistic presuppositions from our worldview, our baseline rational principles, which they then pretend are stolen from theirs. It's absolutely mind-boggling. I think I'm going to need a second fedora for this next part. All right, buckle in. This is where Christian presuppositionalists get really crafty. They look at the fact that everyone in the world has some assumption, like, say, we assume reality exists because we keep stubbing our toes on coffee tables, and they go, aha, every worldview is circular. Then they pat themselves on the back and say, see, our gigantic circle that includes talking snakes, magical fruit, and the fall of man is just as necessary. Right? Because obviously, me assuming I'm not a brain in a vat is on par with them assuming the entire contrived Christian mythos. So Cornelius Van Til famously said that all worldviews start somewhere, as in they start with presuppositions that cannot be proven from outside themselves. That's true, but he then claims that since every worldview has presuppositions, you might as well jump headfirst into a maximal theological system. That makes total sense, right? If everyone has to wear shoes, we all might as well strap on giant clown boots too, I guess, right? There's no other option. You can't go running in tennis shoes. It's gotta be clown shoes. Here is where they fail. Just because everyone has some baseline assumptions or presuppositions, that doesn't mean all assumptions are equally dogmatic. And presupposition and assumption are not synonymous. So don't let them trap you in that, because that's nonsense. They can be used interchangeably in some cases, but there's plenty of cases where they won't be. There's a huge difference between saying, I assume the external world is real because, well, I can't function otherwise. I assume the entire cosmic battle of good versus evil, sin, atonement, resurrection, and the second coming of Jesus is all built into logic. So if you disagree, you can't think at all. Those are two totally separate statements with two totally different sets of assumptions. One has way more baggage. Presuppositionalists basically blur the line between a tiny foundation, like logic is probably valid, and a massive theological dome covering everything from the Trinity to laws about shellfish. Then they try to brand that dome as virtuous circularity, which is really just code for, don't ask questions, our circle is more special than yours, get out of here with that nonsense. Now listen closely. you'll realize here that secular or non-Christian frameworks like, oh, I don't know, naturalism, humanism, or even just common sense tend to start with few minimal assumptions. Stuff like, yes, there's an objective reality. Yes, reason is usually trustworthy. That's it. No cosmic battle. No, if you're not on my side, you can't be rational. Just a baseline so we can have a decent conversation. These minimal assumptions are generally designed to be as universal as possible so people with different beliefs can, well, actually talk to each other and maybe figure out who's got the better arguments. Isn't that refreshingly normal? Isn't that like having a real conversation? Meanwhile, these presuppositionalists waltz in with the entire Christian narrative, the Trinity, original sin, flood myths, virgin births, atoning crucifixions, you name it, all baked in right at the foundational level. They then look at the rest of us like we're the crazy ones for not seeing that as a totally fine place to start. What a joke. They'll say things like, this is the only consistent worldview, but labeling your dogma as a virtuous circle doesn't actually prove it's necessary. It's just a big, shiny label that masks the utter lack of justification. It's like a teacher slapping a gold star on a homework assignment that's actually blank. Wow, so convincing. So there you have it. You see the difference between minimal and maximal presuppositions. Presuppositionals insist they have no choice but to front-load every Christian detail because, hey, all worldviews do it. But in reality, it is the difference between wearing sneakers to go for a run and deciding you're going to need to run around in clown shoes. One is minimal and functional. The other is going to make you fall down on your face. And they're proud of it. All right, fellow reality dwellers, let me set the stage. We've got two big words here, epistemology and ontology. Do not be alarmed. They're not Harry Potter spells. Epistemology is simply how you figure out stuff, your method of investigating the truth, how we know things. Ontology is what is actually out there in the universe, what actually exists, the nature of being. Now, one might think that is simple enough, right? But oh no, our presuppositionalist friends love to push these two together and try to force their misunderstanding on everybody. So once again, epistemology. This is about how we come to know things. Logic, evidence, the scientific method, or just argumentation, right? The stuff we atheists accept in our righteousness. And by accepting our righteousness, I mean we actually use it, unlike certain folks who think yelling, "The Bible," is enough. The Bible! Now, ontology. Once again, this is about what's really out there. Like, do gods exist? Do cosmic unicorns throw meteors around for kicks? Is the universe purely natural, or did a divine finger shoot it into existence? That's ontology, the nature of being. It's pretty basic stuff. So metaphysical necessity is not the same as epistemic necessity, which is why I'm getting into this slide, the conflating epistemology and ontology. Our presuppositionalist friends will come barreling in, screaming, God must exist for logic. If God wasn't real, you couldn't have 2 + 2 = 4. Even if there were some cosmic entity behind the scenes flipping the logic switch on and off, that doesn't mean you have to worship the Jesus God just to do your algebra homework. They're conflating the idea that maybe something big out there sets the rules of existence, which would be ontology, with the bizarre claim that you must believe in that something or you can't read a stop sign, epistemology. It's a giant leap from there might be a thing to you must kneel before that thing to be rational. These presuppositionalists just need to chill out. So here's an example. Picture a theist who says, yeah, I think God's behind the laws of logic, but humans can still figure out logic on their own. No revelation required. Perfectly consistent, right? You've got an ontological stance. God is real, presumably shaping reality, right? But that theist acknowledges we can approach or discover logic without constantly name-dropping the Almighty. But presuppositionalists, they do a swan dive right off the logic high dive. If you don't credit God, you're apparently stealing logic. Thou shalt not pirate logic. This is a total category here. They're mixing up God actually exists, presumably setting up existence, with you must worship said God to even tie your shoes properly. It's pretty crazy, actually. I don't even know how one arrives to this position besides immense amounts of intellectual dishonesty. You literally have to lie to yourself to hold this position. Now, here's the practical consequences. So there's a possible metaphysical sustainer, right? Look, I'm a naturalist presuppositionalist. I accept the self-evident truth of our shared naturalistic, atheistic reality that's been revealed to all of sound mind through both natural and special revelation in an undeniable way, right? We all know that the universal quantum field allows for anything to even be possible, right? But let's just grant, for the sake of conversation, that some cosmic super being did keep the universe from collapsing. That still wouldn't force us to cling to that being for everyday reasoning. We can run experiments, do mathematics, form logical syllogisms, all without a personal relationship to your mythical Jewish carpenter or any other deity for that matter. It's a hard concept, I know. So, presuppositionalists are confusing ontology with the process of belief. So, presuppositionalists love to claim if you don't presuppose a Christian God, you're not rational. As if they own the patent on logic. But newsflash, the existence of a thing doesn't equate to belief in that thing. Even if God were real, that doesn't mean you can't reason if you don't believe. I'll just show you the truth. People across the globe do science and logic every single day without affirming Christianity. And guess what? They're pretty freaking good at it. So yeah, maybe presuppositionalists want to imagine a cosmic cameo from Jesus at every algebraic solution, but the rest of us can do math just fine without paying a heavenly subscription fee. Shocking, right? So, conflating ontology and epistemology. It's a huge problem. It's basically them saying, if there's a God that upholds the universe, you must be chanting hallelujah while you do logic or it doesn't count. That's like saying, if your mom baked the cookies, you can't eat one unless you constantly holler, thanks, Mom, after every bite. Sure, gratitude is nice, but it's not exactly necessary for you to taste, well, sugar. It's the same thing with logic. Anyway, that's the breakdown about epistemology versus ontology. Maybe after seeing this portion, they'll come around and realize that they only have the ability to function at a base level because of the naturalistic presuppositions that they borrow from our worldview so that they can have a minimal level of intelligibility at the local scale. I'm not going to hold my breath there, though. All right, so let's engage with some alternative theories just for the sake of clarity. And we're stepping out of the everything must revolve around Jesus echo chamber for a second to look at some other possibilities. Did you know that not everyone thinks you have to pray on your knees to appreciate logic or morality? Shocking, I know. So some actual philosophers, and yes, they exist outside of Christian seminaries, argue that logic and math can be treated as abstract objects or conventions that describe the consistent patterns in nature. Doesn't require any cosmic sky daddy. See, in this view, we don't need to say God exists, therefore 2 + 2 = 4. Instead, we just recognize, hey, 2 + 2 = 4 because that's how quantities work, bud. It doesn't collapse under claims of equally circular because it's not positing a non-physical sentient being that exists without space-time to hold the whole system hostage. That makes sense, right? Then there's secular moral realism. Imagine that. Moral truths can be grounded in things like rational well-being, empathy, or intrinsic values. No holy footnotes required. Now, Christian presuppositionalists might shriek, "But you're stealing from God's moral law." But newsflash, we can have moral frameworks rooted in not wanting to be terrible to each other without referencing Yahweh's ancient text, which, by the way, also endorses some questionable stuff. Now, if you're allergic to strict naturalism, there's still a buffet of other theistic or deistic ideas. Maybe a vague first cause started the universe and went on cosmic vacation. This might undergird logic or whatever, but it sure ain't spelled out like, and then that first cause became Jesus, and there's a triune something something. It's not necessarily the Christian version at all. But does presuppositionalism ever wrestle with these positions seriously? Nah. Usually they just lump it all into you're either with us or with the mindless void. I guess it's just easier to slap equally incoherent on anything that doesn't have a cross on it and call it a day, right? Now, you might be asking, why do presuppositionalists avoid all other frameworks? And it's because real engagement would force them to do actual comparative analyses. Instead, they love that false dichotomy. Accept the Christian God or be a nihilist monkey with no logic or morals. Thank you, but no thanks. My brain works. Non sequitur alert! These alternatives show that saying, if logic needs a transcendent source, it must be the Christian God, is a big fat non sequitur. It's like saying, because I have a coat, clearly it came from the one coat store I like. Just, no, that's not how logic works. Presuppositionalism's dogmatic approach would be laughable if it wasn't so infuriating. They don't even bother comparing their special revelation claims to other coherent possibilities, and they call us closed-minded. They're the ones with the hardened hearts, and the hardened eyes, and the hardened ears, and the hardened brain. Look, if you were genuinely searching for the truth, you'd examine multiple candidates for a transcendent source or for grounding logic. But presuppositionalists skip that. Straight to, it's Jesus, amen. A rhetorical cheat, if there ever was one. Why bother investigating if your mind's already made up? So there you have it. We've got secular naturalism and moral realism without Sky Daddy permissions, and even other forms of theism and deism that, lo and behold, don't hinge on the entire Christian narrative. But do presuppositionalists care? No! They'll likely keep chanting, it's all equally hopeless without Jesus, while conveniently ignoring these alternative frameworks. Because for them, it's not about actual inquiry, it's about doubling down on their preloaded claims and calling it a day. Okay, here comes another one of those classic pre-sub moves that makes me want to fling my computer across the room. Rejecting the very idea of neutral ground. That's right, they just toss out the whole concept of common criteria. Absolutely wild. They say there's no worldview neutral facts. Presuppositionalists whine, but you can't interpret any fact unless you're wearing our Jesus-tinted worldview glasses. There are no objective facts out there. And if you try to push back, you're labeled biased. But if you accept their presupposition, well, you're practically a brainwashed convert already. How convenient. So they set themselves up in what they think is an impenetrable fortress, immune to criticism. Anyone who doesn't agree at the outset is branded as delusional, biased, or rebellious against God. Well, guess what? That means they don't have to engage any real arguments because they've preemptively declared outside critiques illegitimate. Philosophically, it's a nightmare. No genuine dialogue. No chance for real testing of claims, just a big barricade with a sign that reads, Sorry, you can't question us because you aren't on Team Christian Presupposition. It might be considered an impressive rhetorical shield if it didn't absolutely annihilate their own intellect. All they're doing is protecting themselves from any real dialogue that could possibly occur and critique their position. However, every portion of it is unjustified. But fear not, my fellow atheist presuppositional apologists. There's a way out of this nonsense, and it's shared epistemic criteria. Here's a reality. Full-blown, perfect neutrality might be tricky. Sure, we all have our assumptions, biases, experiences, but it doesn't mean we can't hammer out some shared methods. Ever hear of science, logical reasoning? Yeah, those aren't exactly parochial beliefs. Scientists from all over the world, atheists, theists, deists, pantheists alike, can all agree on experimental procedures, replicate experiments, test hypotheses. The whole point is to have common ground for figuring out what's true in the observable universe. And guess what? It generally works. Show me a presuppositionalist who cures diseases with their special revelation-only approach, and I'll show you a pig that flies. Now, sure, absolute neutrality is probably impossible. You bring your life experience, your cultural lens, maybe even your lunch preferences to the table, right? But that doesn't mean we have to fall into this sectarian all-or-nothing trap. That's just a false dilemma presuppositionalists cook up so they can say, choose Jesus or choose irrational chaos. Ugh. In real life, people from wildly different backgrounds converge on many facts. Do you breathe oxygen? Is gravity a thing? Is the earth roughly spherical? We find ways to agree on these without forcing everyone to recite Bible verses or hail the great spaghetti monster, although one might argue that could be a lot more fun. So yeah, the precepts trying to shut down neutral ground is basically like building a tiny fortress with no doors or windows and then insisting that anyone on the outside has no right to speak, all while ignoring that there's an entire world beyond those walls that they refuse to acknowledge. Thus, presuppositionalists reject neutral ground to keep themselves safe from real scrutiny. And we see it for what it is, a self-serving tactic that basically yells, "No fair!" anytime someone tries to step onto a common playing field. They might call it the only consistent worldview, but all I see is a fortress with no front gate sealed up tight. So next time you hear, you can't evaluate these claims from outside the Bible because that's biased, just remember, they're the ones who said no ground is neutral, and that objective facts don't exist unless you're already chanting their hymn. Sorry, folks, but out here in reality, we do just fine agreeing on plenty of facts without their permission. All right, so we've waded through the swirl of circular logic, conflated categories, and the endless no neutral ground chants. So let's tie this up with a nice little bow, shall we? First, we've got presuppositionalists proclaiming, we're not question begging, we're virtuous. But the truth is, they're lumping the entire Christian mega framework into the same category as a few minimal assumptions, like the external world probably exists. Sorry, but that's not the same. They never quite answer why you'd need the whole Christian story to be consistent, rather than just a few obvious premises that all rational people can share. It's like expecting everybody to buy the collector's edition of the game when it only comes with a few extra skins. It doesn't actually impact the way the game plays. Secondly, we have precepts yelling, God must exist for logic, so you must presuppose God to be logical. Maybe something metaphysical underpins reality. The universal quantum field. Some people think maybe not. But that doesn't automatically mean we have to be chanting Sunday school songs every time we do math, right? Look, even if we grant that some cosmic entity set the stage, currently We can and do figure out stuff without referencing that entity's biography at every turn. That's the difference between what might exist and how we come to know things. Mixing them up is the oldest trick in the giant apologetics playbook. Presuppositionalism is basically a rigged carnival game. You lose if you don't agree with us, and if you ask for evidence, we say there's no neutral evidence. It's viciously circular and deeply unsatisfying. It's like buying a ticket for a roller coaster that never actually leaves the station. They demand total acceptance of their theology up front and then dismiss all outside viewpoints as futile or borrowing from the Christian worldview. Right. That certainly makes sense. Real open-minded of them, huh? Real philosophy doesn't slam its door on everyone who isn't already a part of the club. It welcomes comparisons, evidence, shared methods, minimal assumptions, actual conversation. Imagine that. Instead of piling on dogma at the starting line, how about we separate what is from how we know what is? That way, we don't get stuck in the precept labyrinth. You never know. We might learn something from each other if we're not too busy chanting our own mantras. In the end, presuppositionalism's so-called virtuous circle is just a fancy outfit on the same old question begging. They cram their entire theological narrative into the engine of logic and then act shocked when we don't all salute. Sorry, but that's not how serious inquiry works. And sure, if you're already drinking their Kool-Aid, maybe it feels consistent, but to anyone else, it's just an echo chamber. We can do better, and we are doing better, by embracing a shared epistemic baseline, distinguishing between existence and knowledge, and steering clear of giant dogmatic leaps. So there you have it. Presuppositionalism is exposed for what it is. A system that wraps its circular premise in shiny philosophical foil and calls it inevitable. Thank you so much for watching me rant with my trusty fedora. If you enjoy this video, please make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. And I really appreciate you watching.
Get wrecked, nerd. Got fucking dominated, dude.
Absolutely dominated.